Hey guys, Saul here. This is a completely objective, without a doubt, proper ranking of the best elements. Now, okay, this is more like my top 10 favorite elements because I'm not going to go through the whole 118 element periodic table and rank every element, but I'm going to go through my top 10 favorites and see what you guys think. I'm going to give some facts about them. And be sure to like and comment your favorite elements because I want to hear what you guys think and if there are any dissenting opinions on the coolness of the elements I picked, which there obviously shouldn't be. These are just objectively the best elements. With that, let's hop right into it. Now, the first element out of my 10, my number 10 ranking of my favorite elements is hydrogen. The most abundant element, the first element. You all have heard about hydrogen. It's super useful. It will burst into flames if you get it near sparks. And this is just, it has to be on the list because this is one of the fundamental elements of the universe. It's the only element physicists really care about. It makes up nebulas and stars and all. And this is kind of just the first little building block of elements. This is where it all began. And for that reason, needs a spot on the list. Now we have our next element on this list, which is carbon, and any organic chemists among you will probably concur. Carbon is one of the most fundamental elements to chemistry, and especially organic chemistry. That entire field is built around carbon-based compounds because carbon is such a universal element and it has so much cool chemistry and bonding that it can do, which is why we have entire fields dedicated to the study of carbon-based elements. Even outside of biological processes, carbon has so much cool chemistry and things that can be done. So carbon is a really cool element, and that's why it earns number 9 on the list. Number 8. Number 8 goes to gold, which may seem like a boring element at first, but it's actually a really interesting element. It's one of the few transition metal elements which have any color to them. Most transition metals are just a silvery white in color, and gold is, well, gold. It's super conductive and extremely corrosion resistant to the point that any acid that can actually dissolve gold is kind of considered special. One of them, a very famous one, being called aqua regia, known to be able to dissolve gold. Gold also has really cool mechanical properties in that it's super ductile and it can be pounded into a leaf and get very, very thin because it's so ductile. Gold is also considered one of the noble metals because of its corrosion resistance, only being able to dissolve by aqua regia, which is just hydrochloric and nitric acid. So yeah, that's why gold gets number 8. Number 7. Number 7 of my favorite elements is lead. Lead is a really cool element and it's one of the oldest metals known to man. It's been used for tablets and plumbing for millennia. And it gets its chemical symbol, which is Pb, from the Roman word for it, which is plumbum, and also from the word, that's where the word plumbing comes from, because Roman used lead for their pipes. And funny thing about lead is, we all know it's a toxic metal, and a lot of people assume that like the Romans and all didn't know about its toxicity. People back then also knew about lead toxicity. The thing about water pipes is a lot of the times you get mineral buildup on them, and lead pipes aren't super bad unless you have acidic water that can etch off that mineral coating and get to the actual lead. Another thing about lead is something that the Romans also knew is lead acetate, which is just basically vinegar mixed with lead, is super sweet and it creates a substance known as sugar of lead. And this was used as a sweetener a lot of the times, even with its known toxic effects. Lead is also the last element on the periodic table before you get to radioactive, unstable elements. Lead, funnily enough, even if it's so close to those elements, is used a lot as protection from radiation in shielding and the lot. Number 6, speaking of late periodic table elements, literally right after lead is bismuth, which, funnily enough, is radioactive even if a lot of people consider it stable. That being said, the half-life of bismuth is like billions of times longer than the age of the universe, so For all intents and purposes, it's not radioactive, but in actuality, it's not a fully stable element. People know bismuth for the gorgeous rainbow patterns on bismuth oxidation, and a really cool thing you can do with bismuth is if you cool it slowly, you can make these massive square-shaped crystals that are really, really cool. And if you're daring and safe enough, it's actually completely doable at home because bismuth has a relatively low melting temperature. Number 5, now we're getting into the top half of the coolest elements, and this next one is beryllium. Beryllium is a really cool element that a lot of people don't talk about a lot because it's actually super, super rare even for such a low atomic number. Beryllium is used in a lot of applications for nuclear reasons because it is a really good source of neutrons. If you bombard beryllium with alpha particles or gamma rays, it'll actually release a bunch of neutrons. This is used in nuclear weapons and reactors and any lab purposes that need a good free neutron source. On top of this, beryllium has this really cool property where it's basically invisible to X-rays, so they can use it for windows and any like X-ray machines they need because they can just go right through it. Next on the list is titanium, another transition metal element. And titanium is really cool for its physical properties, in my opinion. It does form these really pretty oxides if you get it to a certain temperature, so you can make rainbows out of titanium or whatever you like. But its mechanical properties are amazing. It's strong, like some very strong modern steels, but it's also super, super light. And this makes it really important in stuff like aerospace applications. The extremely famous, very fast spy plane, the SR-71 Blackbird, actually used titanium paneling along the whole thing because they needed a very strong, very lightweight material. And funnily enough, at the time, the Soviet Union basically had all the titanium mines, and so they had to set up fronts to buy titanium from their enemy to create the spy plane. Now, after titanium, we have uranium, the most famous of the radioactive elements. When people think radiation, they automatically think uranium, and for good reason. Uranium started the nuclear revolution from like the Manhattan Project onwards, and it's one of the most important elements in regards to breakthroughs in chemistry and physics and nuclear chemistry and physics. Because of all the research that went into the production of the atomic bomb and atomic energy, uranium was completely instrumental in that and has some really cool chemistry, both in regards to its like physical properties of radioactive decay and with its creation of stuff like yellow cake and all that's used in nuclear refinement. Uranium is a really cool element, and it also earns such a high place on the list because of what it means for learning about atomic chemistry and the funding that was poured into that. Of course, this funding was used for weapons, which is the stupidest thing you can do with science, but it also made some great breakthroughs in atomic energy. Now, number 2 is tungsten, and I'm not really sure if tungsten has cool enough chemical properties and history to get such a high spot on the list, but I just like tungsten. It's a really cool element. It's super dense, and even a small cube of it can weigh a whole ton, and it has the highest melting point of any of the metallic elements, which is really cool. Tungsten alloys with like steel and tungsten carbides can be like super, super strong and really useful in a lot of applications like industrial tools and machining and all. So tungsten gets a pretty high tier spot on my list of favorite elements. Now, my number 1 favorite element on the entire periodic table, bet you won't guess it, is palladium. Palladium is another one of those transition metals. It is part of the platinum group, noble metal area, super high corrosion resistance. It is just one of those silvery white metals, but like gold, it's also super ductile and can be pounded into a leaf. Sometimes it's used as a coating over things to look like silver, but with a way higher corrosion resistance. Palladium is also probably most famous in common thought in catalytic converters because it has this amazing property of being able to absorb 900 times its own volume in hydrogen, and that's just a really neat chemical property. So they put a lot of that in stuff like catalytic converters. Also, any of you organic chemists will know palladium on carbon as one of the most commonly used catalysts in organic chemistry. So it's a really neat element, it has some cool chemistry going for it, and it's also just really pretty and super valuable. So for those reasons, palladium is my favorite element. I don't know if any of you have any different ideas. I'm sure you do. There's so many elements to pick from. Be sure to comment your favorite elements down below, and I'll see you guys next time.